does it take to sound natural in American English? Well, today we're going to explore that a little bit more with audio files that you send here, and then we'll let you know what are some things that are happening here that sound natural, what are some things that don't, and how can we bridge that gap. Good morning, guys. Good evening. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Schwa Mill. This is your American English pronunciation review show. And to guide you in this process, there's me. Hi. My name is Geoff. It rhymes with breath. That is one of the 4 keys to a natural sound in American English, including placement, pitch, breath, trying to weaken consonant sounds in order to strengthen your vowel sounds. We're going to be referencing all of those points today as we look at 2 additional files. And as always, I do want to give a quick shout out to people who have sent us files. They are in a special Schwa Mill Telegram group that is completely free. So if you would like to send in your own audio files to get feedback from me, you are certainly more than welcome to do that. You can find a link in the video description. This show is not possible without that. Let's take a listen to our very first file here and give some feedback.
Better, best, check, left.
Okay, I'm going to play it one more time.
Better, best, check, left.
Okay, it sounds to me like we're taking a look at the vowel sound. This is the S sound, like in best or get, said, desk, things like that. I can hear the vowel, which is great. Sometimes people are confusing this vowel with the sound, which we'll talk about a little bit later because we actually have a question in reference to that. But for this sound in general, some suggestions I have are trying to get your tongue wide. So for instance, if I do that, can you see how like wide my tongue is when I do that? It goes like all the way across. Versus if you have like a narrow tongue, if you make your tongue narrow, like, see right there, it's not as wide. But if I do this, now my tongue's wider. So you can control how wide or narrow your tongue is. So let's go maybe like a wider tongue. Okay. And close your mouth more and straighten your lips. And the goal is to get it sound like because we're trying to block a lot of air through the mouth, but still have a lot of air passing through the throat. The other thing I would say with this too is that when you're making this sound, maybe helpful to have just some straighter lips. And you don't really need your mouth too open for it either. And make sure not too relaxed. I mean, they are very relaxed. Okay. The big thing I have to say here, though, is I think related to placement.
Better, best, check, left.
It really sounds to me like we're almost projecting here, kind of like top of throat, back of mouth. So like better, best, check, left. Okay, what's up to David hanging out with us? What's up, sir? So it sounds to me like we're projecting pretty high. Better, best, check. Versus if I did like better, best, check. Do you hear that difference? A lot of that is not necessarily mouth position related. It's just where we're projecting from. You're projecting almost sounds like kind of like around this area. I'm projecting closer to my diaphragm, chest area. So like doing some exercises, just so like It's like just try to move it down. You can also try dragging. So like and notice when you get to the bottom, try repeating that final sound a couple times. So like okay, so just kind of repeating that and seeing what kind of sound that goes for. So I think just trying to get some of these words lower would be very, very helpful. Okay, let's repeat the audio again.
Better, best, check, left.
The one final comment I want to make about this is looking at the word left, which starts off with the letter L. There's a couple of consonant sounds that we always want to be mindful of. I think B's are one of them. So for instance, like in better and best, because they can make you pop and raise your placement, like better with like a really heavy B versus, trying to weaken it and keep it low, like better. You want to watch out for T's and R's, but another letter you want to watch out for is the letter L. A lot of people are producing L sounds using a light L, so projecting up here. It's like which can be fine. It's fine to have your tongue up here as long as you keep the placement down. So the American English L sounds like L, la. It's not la, la. Do you got a difference between la and la, la, la? So we want to use the lower placement. And I think something that's happening here is I think we're using a light L on left and causing that to raise the placement.
Better, best, check, left.
You can hear that S sound is different than all the others. It's like left, left versus left, left. So we want to lower that placement on any vowel that comes after an L. It may be easier to use a dark L. For a dark L, instead of doing like a L sound, it's like oh. Okay. So I would recommend, for instance, kind of working our way down with the tip of our tongue. So instead of doing that la, using the tip of the tongue here, la, 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 la. I don't know if you see it. It's the middle of my that's the tip of my tongue down. Tip of my tongue high looks like la, la. See that kind of flick versus la, la. Now there's no flick because the tip of my tongue is against my bottom tooth. It's like la, left. I would work on that progression with the tip of my tongue down. La, left, la, left, la, left. All right, so just some quick points of feedback there. I hope you find that helpful. Thank you for sending the audio. Lots of great things there. Just shifting the placement down, I think we'll have a pretty dramatic effect if we're able to do that. Before we move on to our second file, I just want to check on the chat. Hold on here. I'm sorry because it's not related, but what do you think theme and rime in writing and speaking? I'm not entirely sure what rime is a reference to, but I do thank you for the question here. If you can elaborate on rime, that RHEME, but for theme, are we talking about like argumentative writing? Are we talking about pronunciation? I need a little more information about the question in order to get the best answer. If we are talking big picture like theme and writing, yeah, that's extremely important. Like deciding what you're talking about and making sure everything is in alignment. You know, in terms of your sentences, in terms of your vocabulary, and everything. While we wait for more elaboration on that question, though, let's take a listen to our second file here.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by moving to the dorm.
Okay, let's listen to that one more time.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by moving to the dorm.
Okay. There are a couple sections here that are a little bit tricky for me to get. I would say the first half is very clear. Take the money through the hotel part. And the second half gets a little bit less clear. So we can kind of talk about why is that happening? Why are some parts of this a little bit harder to understand than others?
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by moving to the dorm.
Okay. So one thing I noticed about the section that's much easier to understand, which is that first half, is listen to some, for instance, of the pitch patterns and the contrast.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could.
It's like that. The amount of the money. Do you see how we kind of get that staircase movement down? Amount of the money. So we have a greater range of pitches in that first half, which not coincidentally also makes that easier to understand. When we then move on to the next thought group and it goes high again, that again continues with the contrast.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take.
It's like the amount of the money they had. So we're high again at the, and then it drops again. Hotels there. So like da 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 da. Okay, so that's your basic pattern there, and there's a lot of like pitch movement, things like that, and that's going to greatly help your listener. If you wanted to continue amplifying the contrast, because we can continue to make our listeners' jobs and lives a little bit easier, is if we increase the other elements of contrast. Right now, everything, for instance, is very firm. It's like everything is very, very firm. Versus if we incorporate, for instance, some softness. You know, so notice that it kind of softens. It starts firm and then it gets softer, softer, softer. That's another element of contrast you can play around with. Another element of contrast would be speed. So, like for instance, instead of doing you know, da 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 da. It's like something like that. The more elements of contrast you give your listener, the easier it's going to be to for them to understand you. Additionally, it also is going to actually help you sound more natural. So let's take a look at what's happening kind of in the second half here.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by moving to the dump.
Okay. So like that second half, all those like pitch movements and staircases that we had disappear. And what ends up happening is we have these short thought groups, like 2, 3 syllables, and then we're switching up again to the new thought group, and we're doing that over and over again, and that's very disruptive because we're constantly stressing things, and anytime we have lots of short sequences with lots of stresses, where the pitches kind of start bleeding in to each other, it's going to be a hard experience for your listener to get that.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by.
It's like we can take, we could save at $5. It's like there's a lot of erratic movement up and down, so we're never able to enter a flow because we're constantly restarting and starting a new thought group and adding a new stress. So the end result is very disruptive, and that makes it hard for your listener to track. Okay. Another thing that's making this a bit challenging as well is some of the stress patterns are not what speakers in North America are going to be looking for. So, for instance, you stressed there's $5 in there, $5. But the typical stress on that would actually be on dollars, not on five. So instead of $5 more, $5. It took $5.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by moving to the dump.
I'm also not entirely sure what that very last word is. Sounds like dove, but that wouldn't make sense to move to a dove. So watching out for that stress on like $5, cutting down on the stresses. So if it may be helpful to take that second half that we're looking at right now and change your thought groups. I would say, hey, can you say that second half and maybe instead of like 5, 6, 7 thought groups, can you maybe cut it down to like 2 or 3 and just kind of see what that allows you to do? It's going to cut down your stresses. It's going to give you longer runways with your pitches so we can get back into that kind of staircase, like this descending pattern you had earlier, like da 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 da, like something like that. So we want to lengthen the thought groups a little bit, and I think that's going to make it a lot easier to understand because right now it's a little bit tricky. The last thing I'll say about this audio,
the amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by moving to the dump.
Yeah. I think that the vowel lengths themselves in your syllables is fine. You could probably weaken some of your consonant sounds because they're really hitting you. Now, some of that may just be we're talking close to the microphone and things like that. That can cause that to happen too. But maybe we could weaken some of these consonant sounds a little bit.
The amount of the money they had on the hotel there, we could take and we save like $5 by moving to the dump.
There's a little phrase like of the money versus other money. Compare those two. Of the money, heavy consonants. Other money, softer consonants. Like take and save versus like take and save. Take and save. Take and save. So like just kind of weakening the S sounds and T's and K's and things like that will also have a pretty big impact and give those vowels a little bit more room and become more dominant. Okay. But thank you for sending that audio file as well. Greatly, greatly appreciated. I mentioned earlier there's a question I want to address from our group, but before we do that, I do want to give just a quick shout out to our sponsor, which is us. So we have a program called Magnet Lab. If you are someone that is interested in just understanding your own communication, you want to understand why are people communicating with me the way they are, because of my body language. I want to get better at my body language and what I express. I want to be able to use my voice to convey more emotion. I want to sound less stiff. I want to sound more natural when I talk. These are things that we do in Magnet Lab. Basically, every day of the week, Monday through Friday, for 30 minutes. It's kind of like this. But for this, we look at audio files for like 5 minutes. In Magnet Lab, we're looking at 2 video and audio files for about 15 minutes and giving lots of notes on body language, posture, sounds. So that way, you can enter any situation, whether you're just talking with a friend, whether you're leading a meeting, whether you want to make a video, whether you want to make a podcast, maybe start your own YouTube channel, maybe we want to teach, whatever the situation may be, this is going to prepare you for that. So the last thing you have to worry about is your language, because you're going to be doing so many techniques naturally. They're going to make you a lot more expressive, so you can focus more on the message you're trying to deliver. If that sounds like something that you would be interested in, you can find more information at fluentamerican.com/magnetlab. It would be great to work with you. Got some highs coming in too. Sam and Chipmunk saying, hey, what's up, Sam? Thanks for hanging out with us. All right, let's take a look and see. There was a question that came in that I did want to focus on. This is from Fahima. And Chuck E. Cheese is also hanging out with us as well. Okay, so here is our question. The sounds a bit like ah. I know my mouth and tongue should be for pronouncing them, but when I pronounce it's different from what I hear from Americans. Okay, so we're confusing the sound and the sound if I'm interpreting that right. So this is the words like, for instance, like in like Gus versus gas. Okay. So this S sound we talked a lot about at the beginning of class. So I would direct you to the first audio file we looked at. Okay, because we talked a lot about the but now we can talk about the So for the sound, it's almost like your tongue's gonna make kind of like a upside down U shape. The tip of your tongue is down, back of your tongue is down. You can also have your tongue a little bit wider. I mean, your mouth a little bit wider. So like ah. I would say you want to feel almost like a little bit more tension on the corners of your lips. Whereas for the sound, we had straight, relaxed lips. For the sound, you can have a little bit of pulling. And also, you want to make sure your placement is lower. So, for instance, if we compare these two words like start with those. Just try to be able to separate those. Then you can add, for instance, like that first consonant. So like g, ga, ga. And then you can add the full words like g, ga, gus, gas. Okay. We have some videos and things on the channel as well that go into more detail on all of these sounds. So I'm going to try afterwards to put a link to a video that will just go into more detail on this. But thank you for asking that question. Mid-10 is here. I have a question as well. In casual speech, Americans ever dropped the D and you'd come, as I thought you'd come? Or is it more like a stop D? Okay, because it's before the K. You can't just completely remove the D because you're changing the grammar. Okay, so we have to be careful of that. Thank you for the question, by the way. So what you're going to hear instead, you're going to hear that held sound like I thought you'd come, or you'd come. I thought you'd come. That's what or I thought you'd go, or I thought you'd leave. Like all of those things, held sounds, held D's on those. You can't just say I thought you come. That sounds different. Or I thought you leave. No, it's I thought you. You have to have that held D there. Just a note. There was one other question in our group that I wanted to take a look at. It's from Arush. And allow me to chat for us. Thank you so much for sending this. Okay. Hey, Geoff, I had a question. Right now, I'm primarily focusing on placement and breathing, but I started noticing something with the native speakers. It seems like the words sort of connect with each other, and it sounds really natural. What exactly is it? Is it one thing or a combination of things, and how can I start learning this? All right, thanks for saying that. So, I'd like to start streams by when I introduce myself, telling people that we're focusing on 4 things: placement, pitch, breath, weakening consonant sounds, to strengths and vowel sounds. And it's a combination of all those things. When you hear native speakers connecting things, there's a couple things that are happening. American English requires a lot of breath. Okay. And by incorporating that breath, what happens to get that resonance and that warmth that you hear, that's my voice coming from my diaphragm, what has to happen is your placement has to go down. You have to project lower to engage your diaphragm. Now, as you do that to keep the breath flowing, what happens is you have to basically weaken your consonant sounds because your consonant sounds are going to chop up your breath. And so to prevent that from happening, we're going to weaken them. Now, the problem with doing all that is it can make your sentence turn to mush. It'll be hard to understand you. It sounds like you're just like, you hear people saying like it sounds like mumbling or people eating their words or things like that, or people sound quote unquote lazy. But the reality is that American English needs those three things. But for them to be understandable, that's why you need contrast. So that's why you need the pitch differences and the speed differences, the firmness differences, and things like that. So when you're hearing people connecting their speech, just because of a lot of those factors kind of combining together, it's the weak consonant sounds, it's the constant breath and resonance that's kind of moving through. It's that need for air. All those things kind of join together to get that linking sound that you're hearing. Okay. All right, I believe that's all the questions that came in. So I'm going to work on my way out. But hey, thank you guys for hanging out with me. There are a lot of pronunciation resources out there. So the fact that you spent some time here is greatly appreciated. I hope to see you again in our program, Magnet Lab, which again, I think is going to greatly help you move towards your goals. Magnet Lab hasn't been around for a while, but just seeing the growth that our members have done in just like less than 2 months has like been pretty wild. And I'd love for you to have that as well. But we'll also be back with the stream as well on Monday. I hope you guys have a good weekend, have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon.